We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So welcome everyone, welcome to people and members of our community in the gallery here in person. I'd also like to welcome anyone who's watching on YouTube. We are being live streamed this evening, and that stays up. If you want to watch it over and over again, you can do so. Not that I don't know if anybody want to do that, but anyway. I'd like to welcome all elected members here this evening and staff. Welcome everyone. Welcome to our minute takers. Kate Symes, welcome Kate. CEO Henry, and welcome Henry. So we have one apology, and that is Councillor Goldstone. And Councillor Tooley is not here. I haven't heard that he's an apology, so he's a non-attendance at this stage, but he may come through. Are there any motions to grant leave of absence, councillors? There be none, and I have no leave of absence on the books. Now we move on to public open forum, that is item 3 on our agenda, and this is for a total time of up to 20 minutes, and anyone can come forward and speak to council. Generally, it's around about 5 minutes if you wish to do that on any matter. I do have Catherine Warhurst, who's the chair of our Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group. So welcome, Catherine. But before you start, I might just ask, is there anyone else that wishes? Yes, ma'am? Okay, you wish to speak as well? Yes. Is there anyone else? Yes. Janine, welcome, Janine. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, so there's 3. So we'll allocate 5 minutes. Okay, Catherine, if you'd like to, you have the floor, Catherine. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Now, is that turned on?
I don't know, is it? Is it turned on? Yes,
That's
it is, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm here tonight as the chair of your Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group. We've put in a submission to the budget process. While there's a number of general recommendations that we hope add value to a number of items, there are 2 in particular that I'd like to draw your attention to. Firstly, the funding of a energy feasibility study, I think, is absolutely critical work for going forward with the council. At the moment, the council costs for energy purchasing is in the region of $600,000 to $850,000 per year. With the way energy procurement is working, there's many new options that are available on the market, and I think it's worth the council understanding fully what the potential options are for it to source its renewable energy options. If this particular piece of work isn't funded this year, it will significantly impact the delivery timeline of the overall Climate Emergency Action Plan. This is a piece of critical analysis needed for decision making. For example, it's really wonderful that we've got an extra $150,000 for some solar panels, and while I'm always an advocate of more, not less, in terms of panels, sometimes we really don't know what is the best way to deploy that and to that particular spend for the maximum benefit for the council. This year we'll also be entering into negotiations for the next power purchase agreement to source our energy for the council, and we really should be entering that phase as informed as possible about the alternatives that are available to us. So I would like to recommend that to receive funding. The second thing I'd like to draw your attention to is what we've identified is around 7 to 10% of all of the council emissions is through the gas boiler of the pool. If heat pumps were used to replace that, that could substantially bring those costs down. We're looking at an 85% reduction in energy consumption for pool heating, a 40% reduction in energy costs, a 65% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and 100% transition from natural gas burning. Why I also think it's a particularly good idea is that we do have an outstanding offer from Carina, which is Citizens' own renewable energy network, to provide a zero interest upfront loan to the council to cover the initial outlay, and then the council only has to pay that back as it's going. Now, Carina are very keen on this, and in fact, they've reached out to us recently to follow up on how this discussion's going. They've already got $29,000 already raised, and they're seeking to do it. They want to get pools off gas. So they're really keen to partner with the council. I hope that's helpful. I think I should be within my 5 minutes. And I would definitely recommend to the council that those two things in particular are funded. I know that you've all said that a number of you committed to climate actions in letters to the community prior to your election. I'd like to remind you of all those commitments. We are in an emergency situation, and I think that justifies some urgency in terms of our decisions around spending on these matters. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Catherine. You got a question? Yep, Councillor Tooley. Have you got a microphone in? Where's your mic? There it is. All right.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for that. Could you just clarify, particularly for the members who might not perhaps realise, it was thought of the gas was the better of the fossil fuels, better than coal, but it's moved an awful long way since then, and there's a huge campaign to get off gas.
Yes, that's right.
We know there's a push to get the 2 down under off gas for a lot of reasons, symbolic as well as others. Could you just perhaps give us a little bit of insight into why this is so important to get us off gas, get us onto an electricity-based form, i.e. a heat pump, because obviously that's sourcing from renewables.
Yeah, well, clearly gas is still a fossil fuel. I think the term transition fuel is completely out of date, especially when there's increasing evidence to show that fugitive emissions are occurring in the production and the transportation of this stuff. So it's not just what's burnt at the point of combustion, it's all the way along the production chain. So yeah, it is not something that we should be doing anymore. The beauty of the heat pumps too is that we can use those for any water heating upgrade we might want to do. So I understand that the pool, it's getting a little bit old. However, if we look at the spending that we're going to be doing in the near future, we're probably not going to be replacing the pool as the first priority in the next few years. If we look at our debt burden and the cycles and its priority in terms of what's happening in the community with COVID and all sorts of things. So I actually think that it's a good opportunity to upgrade it, and then those heat pumps can then be recommissioned anywhere else we want, in any new pool that we want. So I think it's quite useful.
Thank you, Catherine. I might move on to the woman with the beret. I don't know your name. If you'd like to come forward. What was your name, ma'am? Because we include you in our agenda. Marianne? Fadulas, come forward, Marianne.
I had prepared a 10-minute talk. I wasn't sure, but I'll try to work out which bits to eliminate.
We'll stick to the 5 minutes. We'll give you a 30-second warning, Marianne. All good.
Okay, I haven't had time to reduce it, but anyway. Mayor Karen Redman, Finance and Corporate Manager Paul Horwood, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I've recently received your letter and understand that the council is looking to add the cost of street trees along the Link Road of $535,000 onto our separate rates. I believe that the upcoming meeting tonight is about discussing the possibility of removing the separate rate and also not adding to it. The separate rate was placed on around 30 future potential development properties to pay for the Potts Road traffic lights and Link Road when they are subdivided. When I ask people how many people are going to pay for this, the answer is 30 people. Our property on 31 Bowman Court was severed by 3 acres by the highway compulsory acquisition for the Gawler Link Road project, and the property is now less attractive to developers due to its smaller size. Also, a road has been put through our property, making it less attractive due to noise and pollution. The Gawler East separate rates of hundreds of thousands of dollars has further rendered our property as less viable for development. Now, a further addition of cost to the separate rates is leaving our property unviable and unsaleable for development. The money for the separate rates is coming directly out of our pocket and not the developers. Our property has currently a separate rate of around $300,000. The developer will buy the land at a certain price, so now instead of us getting all the money, it will give a lot of the money to the council and we'll be left with the rest. So the council will get about $300,000 of the whole price the developer is prepared to pay. In effect, that means $300,000 comes out of the landowner's money instead of going to the landowner. In effect, our land has been devalued by $300,000. So in effect, it's an impost. In effect, the $3,000 is an impost and tax that has been levied by the council on us regarding of selling price. If the developer is prepared to pay, say, $1 million, then we would only get $700,000 after the impost of $300,000 is given to the council. $300,000 is our tax when the developer is, if the developer is prepared to pay $1 million. This is our loss, not the developer's loss. So if we sell and get the $1 million that the developer is prepared to pay and then have to pay $300,000 tax to the council, this leaves us with only $700,000. Is that fair and reasonable? I think not. It's also unfair that only 30 landowners have to pay for improvements for the whole town of Gawler. The whole town should be contributing to the cost of improvements for the whole town of Gawler, not just 30 landowners. The increase in rates for the whole town of Gawler would not be significant, whereas the increase in rates for 30 landowners is very significant. The money for the council could be recouped much quicker if the rates were shared by the whole community. So is this the intention of council, that the 30 properties remain undeveloped for 30 decades, not 30 decades, for decades? If so, I understand why the separate rates have been added. If development is considered important in our town, then it's not a good idea if there is no further development, then the $8.167 million that the council needs to collect will remain uncollected. I think that as the roads are not private and they are public roads used by everyone, so the cost should be shared with the Gawler community and not burdened on a handful of people. Everyone in the Gawler community will benefit from the trees, aesthetic appearance, the fresh oxygen they create. Everyone will benefit from having less traffic going through the main street of Gawler and improving access in and around Gawler. I did a little calculation based on the Gawler population according to the Bureau of Statistics in 2016. It said that Gawler had a population of 26,500 people. I divide 535,000 for the trees into this, and I get $20 per person is what the community would have to pay. This surely is not too much for members of the Gawler community to pay, and this would be a quick way to collect the money. Even at the 8.16 million that you need to collect, if you divide that by 26,500, that's about $300 per person. This could be paid over 3 years or more. Again, a faster, more reliable way of retrieving the costs that ultimately will benefit Gawler and the surrounding community. So basically, I plead to the Gawler Council to consider removing this separate rate, as our property will be unsaleable to developers, and hence your ultimate purpose of raising the required revenue will not be achieved. If we cannot get the value we want for our property, or no one wants to buy, it's going to be
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. Okay, so lots of people use this road, all the schools, Gawler High School, Trinity Families, St. Bridget's Catholic Primary School. There's lots of people that be using this. And so we've already suffered a significant loss due to the highway acquisition, and we haven't been sufficiently remunerated. We're still fighting with lawyers. So we're seeking that you, I'm trying to cut it down.
You're doing very well, Mary.
Trying to reduce or eliminate completely these separate rates, especially the trees and and all the rates in actual fact, because no developer will want to touch our land. So and also there's one more thing. Our rates increased about 4,600 in 1 year from 19 to 20. How much more will it be in 10 years or 20 years? And also if you add the street trees to this, what else will be added on next year and the year after? I notice you also want to add lighting and car parking bays and second footpaths. When will it stop? This is very unfair. So as landowners are actually paying the separate rates ourselves, if we subdivide by way of lower selling price and tax on what the developers would have been prepared to pay, hence a separate rate on these properties means they'll never be subdivided or even sold. So the council will actually never get paid if this happens. So again, I plead that you split the cost amongst the community. The council, if the council needs to recover the money for the link road, infrastructure, traffic lights and trees, please think about splitting the money against the community. And even if it takes a few years to keep the cost per property down, that's the best way that you'll recover the money. That is what is fair and right. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marianne. Now, I might keep moving and we can ask questions at the end. So Janine Panagiotti, I think you're next. Thank you. So
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to
I'll give you a
speak.
30-second warning at the end, Janine.
I won't need it.
Okay.
Thank you anyway. I agree with what Marianne spoke about. I'm really disappointed that council have been thinking about putting our rates up and spreading it over 30 families in the community when all of Gawler are going to use this new road that's been put in. My question was going to be how many people got the letter, but when listening to Marianne and saying that there was 30 families that got it, I'm actually in disbelief. Our family won't use the road as much. We travel to Adelaide, we travel into Gawler. The roundabout is slowing us down already. I understand about all of Gawler are going to use that road, especially those at Gawler East. I'm struggling to understand the logic in that. Where's the fairness in it? Our family chose to move to One Tree Hill for the beautiful, because it does affect us all who have been given this letter. It's all of Gawler that lives here, not just the 30 people that have received the letter. So please consider it and think about us as landowners. We love living in Gawler and we wouldn't like to have to move because rates have gone so high. I wouldn't want to see that happen. So please consider what we're asking. Please rethink about the rates. Share it amongst Gawler. Marianne had some great ideas there. You know, we don't have to have all the trees up straight away. Think about a plan where we can all invest in this together. A lot of people are going to use that road. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, any other? Yes. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. I know your face, but...
Yes, hello, David Lesky. I'll try and make
David Lesky.
I'll try and make this brief and stick to 4 points.
Thank you, David. We'll just take note of your name. Kate, have you got... Yep, it's
Yes.
all right for the
L-E-S-K-E.
minutes. Thank
Yes. First, when I looked up the separate rate policy, I discovered that it was updated last year with one important change which I don't think is desirable. It's changed from collection on subdivision of property to collection on sale or change of title of property, which means in the case of a forced sale due to death or personal circumstances, not a sale to a developer, the property is devalued by the infrastructure charge immediately. So I really don't think that's intended. Second point, I'm not happy. It appears that this is being treated as a bucket, as a credit card for easy payment for council. The thought of spending $500,000 on trees at $2,000 each seems ridiculous. I'm sure if we ask people in the community to grow trees towards the road instead of buying them retail, we'd have a lot of interest and a lot more community ownership in the trees and care for the trees. Thirdly, I don't think it's reasonable asking for this funding just from the nearby landowners. For residents of Bowman Court on the south side of the gully, the road provides zero value because we already had good connection southwards and we don't go north for anything. So the road doesn't make it easier to get into Gawler. It's just given us a year of disruption. So we certainly don't see that it's worth us paying $400,000 towards. And finally, it's 15 years since the council started dragging us to meetings, telling us how good it would be to have the area rezoned so that we could make lots of money selling to developers. We make nothing unless we sell out and leave Gawler. We built a house here, we like it, and we want to stay. And if we stay, the council gets nothing from this development charge. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, I think that Mr. McPhail.
Thanks, Mayor Redmond and Council. I haven't actually prepared anything particularly, and I'm afraid I missed the early speeches, but I'd just like to add the point. I think that you can debate the merits of the separate rate one way or the other, but I think this latest move to add $500,000 for mature trees, where we could put in immature trees, wait 4 or 5 years, and hey presto, we've got mature trees, I think is just extraordinarily irresponsible. I think any budget would look at that, and if you had the money in your pocket, would you actually want to pay for mature trees when you can just save some money and put in immature ones if you need trees at all? So I think that to ask, what is it, 30 families in the area to pay for what I really think is irresponsible is just, it's silly. So I disagree with it very, very strongly, as I think all of the others do. And I agree with the concept that, yes, 30 of us are paying, and perhaps we're making something if we sell the land off. But this road will be used by Barossa. It'll be used by all of Gawler to bypass the main street, rightfully so. But to assume that a very small group of us should pay for that is, I think it's quite unfair. So that's really all I want to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Tully, you had a question?
It's sort of been asked, I think, but it was basically, I just wanted clarification that the 30 families and the 530,000 for the trees is based on information that was provided in the letter or in the reading of the budget proposals? Because everyone's been consistent on that point. I just want to be clear where that that absolute is coming from.
Mr. Horwood, thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Karen. There was a direct letter, given the nature and the dollars we're referencing, Mayor, there was a direct letter sent to all the affected landowners, and that outlined the proposal with the street trees in terms of what the separate rates that had been levied for 2019-20 and the indicative separate rates that would be applied for 2021 to illustrate to each of the affected landowners what the potential financial impact would be. So it was prudent and appropriate that we sent those direct letters.
Okay, I'm not sure if you answered that question. Your question was around Sorry? Yeah, how many people, how many residences received the letters?
It's through you, Mayor Karen. It's about 30 ratepayers that were affected.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Councillor Tooley? Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on. And thank you everyone for coming along this evening and speaking to council. We shall move on. Are there any declarations of interest in any matter that is being discussed tonight? No? Okay, so we'll move on to the officers' reports, and I'm on page 5 of the agenda. And we've received some submissions, and the officers have put forward a recommendation that we receive those submissions. Councillor Davies.
So just clarifying, does this cover the way that this motion is phrased? Do we need to add into the motion submissions that we think should be added, or is this just the motion is that we accept the submissions and then we go from there at some future point?
All the submissions are what has been received to date.
Sure, but like if we wanted, for example, the climate emergencies, one of their proposals to go in, would that have to go in the motion, or is this motion just saying that we've received it?
Yeah, so we'll consider it, but then any further discussion around budget would come at a future meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the motion. I think Councillor Davies just explained it fairly well, as he often does. He summarised it quite well. This meeting tonight, we are just receiving the submissions. As the motion reads, so as the Mayor has said, I thank the people coming out tonight and giving their submissions. I think all councillors will take them down, we will continue to work on our budget, and also the fact that the whole of the town is also affected by the COVID virus and things like and other issues as well. But I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fraser. Do you wish to speak at all, Councillor Fraser? Any other discussion on this matter? Councillor Tooley. Did you have your hand up, Councillor Davis? Yep, and you next. Councillor Tooley.
Just a couple of questions first, if I may, before I speak to the motion. The speakers tonight made it clear that the separate rate would come to the council should they sell, should they develop, should that trigger point happen. It sounds like we're committed to the 530,000 for the street trees. So assuming nobody sells, there is no income from a separate rate.
That's right.
How will the 530,000 be funded?
Mr. Delina, that's your portfolio.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Redmond, the council will be funding the cost of the trees up front. So it was already agreed to fund it in our budget, in the 2021 budget, and allowed the expenditure to occur. So the work is actually commenced on the road alignment at the moment, in terms of preparing for the tree planting, the tree pits that are required. So effectively it would be collected as development occurs, and there'd be a reimbursement to the council, and the separate rate would be adjusted based on the actual amount owable to the council on an annual basis.
Thank you. Your second question?
It is regarding the cost of the trees. One of our speakers tonight gave us an average and said it's about $2,000 per tree. And I think we have asked this question before, and I think it's worth asking it again. The answer I'm told was that when you pay commercial rates and you get advanced trees and then you look at the maintenance of it, the figures build up, hence $2,000. But I've raised this point before, whether it's planting of the grasses under the entry statement or as has been mentioned tonight. Are we locked in, or are we able to reconsider this? Because, for example, if we were able to tap into the likes of Job Seeker as a council and engage and give some horticultural arborist training, whatever the correct term is, to some people to assist in planting younger trees, and possibly also for their job seeker payment, continue to learn some skills in nurturing those. That could be a win-win, a huge saving, but also great for people who are receiving such a payment.
I'll just
So
refer that to Mr. Delena. So if you could just, if you're happy to address that, Mr. Delena.
Yes, certainly, Mayor Redmond. I think maybe up front, I'll just reference the cost of the trees is probably 10 to 15% of the actual cost of the works. The trees themselves aren't a major component. The actual majority of the work is in establishing and digging the tree pits that are required. These tree pits are quite large as they relate to the central median, and they're required to be excavated, I think it's 4 metres by 2 metres by 1.5 metres deep, and there's a line I put in the bottom to protect the sewer line. So that was a requirement for SA Water, and also to provide a growing environment that's going to allow these trees to flourish in the future. And some of the areas that we're excavating these pits are rock. So effectively trying to ensure that they've got a healthy medium to grow and meet the desired objective of a boulevard fill in the future. Go back to the question as it relates to the ability to bring in potentially other resource. We have entered into a contractual arrangement now to dig the holes and to come back and plant the trees, and then also to maintain the trees for 12 months. So that's all part of the contract that we've entered into. And we had to act quick in this space because we had a very small window before the link road opened. And then if you might recall, the cost to implement this would have been 60% more at doing it under live traffic and reduced efficiencies of production in terms of construction. So hence why we've moved very quickly. We've got a contractual arrangement in place, and the actual tree cost is a very small component, about 10 to 15% of the overall price.
Thank you, Mr. Delena. I think that clarifies that question. Now, did you want to speak to the motion, Councillor Tooley? No, you've got the floor.
I think we're all going to endorse the motion because it is really just noting and accepting the submissions. I think the most important part of the motion is point 2, and that is that we give consideration. The bit, if any, worries me. I know why it's in there, but my hope would be that we would really give due attention to the submissions. I don't believe we have a very good record in the community for actually doing what we say we do. We say that we listen, we say that we value community feedback, but I think our track record, certainly since I've been on council, would be that that's not always the case. Even when we've had overwhelming feedback, we've sometimes just sidelined that or ignored that. I made note here of a number of points that were made. The example of 30%, if you were to sell your land for $1 million, 30% of it, 300,000, comes as a tax. That is huge, a huge amount. The fact that this is spread across 30 landowners, I think all our speakers made a very strong point. Is that fair? Is that equitable? And the point that none of this will be realised if land is not sold, it's predicated on the fact that the people do want to develop their land, do want to divide it, do want to make money from it. Some may not. And I would think in the short term, it's very unlikely that we are going to recoup anything from the separate rate. I believe that will be becoming part of our bottom line, and that leads to the last point, 530,000 for those trees. And I accept Mr. Delena's point that we appear to be locked in, and I do understand some of the logic in getting things done early. But I think we need to, and it's the same with the grasses for the entry statement. You know, we jump to contractors when I don't think we spend enough time, and we're the members, it's shame on us as well. It's not just the administration, because we should be stepping in and saying, is this local? Can we use locals? Can we use volunteers? Is there a better way that we can do it? And I'm a great advocate now, and I hope you, Mayor, if you continue with the LGA, that there's a real opportunity for us as councils to step into this new world post-COVID, which is stepping in and taking advantage of JobKeeper and giving real skills to people who are getting the money from the feds. But we can train them and we can engage them. We've got more projects than we'll ever be able to do. So listening to the speakers tonight has just reminded me of those facts as well, and I share those in my commentary. And as I say in point 2, I hope we as a council do justice to the submissions and the presentations that have been given to us tonight. And I thank them for coming out tonight and for giving us those presentations.
Thank you. Now, well, I might go to Councillor Davies, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Fraser.
So a couple of questions. The first one, just to follow up about the tree pits. I'm not an expert in trees, but basically, so if we try to do it without extensive tree pits, would that be just mean that the trees are not stable, wouldn't be able to get their roots in, or or cracks might appear on the road, that kind of thing? Is that what we're trying to deal with these tree pits?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Redmond. Trying to provide the most appropriate growing median for the trees. And it varies depending if it's in the verge or if it's in the central median. But part of it is putting root barriers in. As it relates to trees that are planted in central median, the root barrier was a requirement to go in over the sewer line to make sure that that sewer line wasn't compromised in the future. It was part of the approval given by SA Water to plant them. And I think the intent that council and the development plan always envisaged this would be a boulevard. And there were some images that we provided to the council when we were looking at trees and how the trees could be incorporated into the link road. And mind you, that's something that we had to fight for as an administration with DIPT to make sure that we ended up with a treed outcome. This was really the only way that it could be done. There is smaller pits in the verges per se, but these are all in accordance with best practice landscaping principles, not as developed by consultants that are working with DIPT and engaging with our professionals as well within the business.
Another question.
And second question, just wondering if staff had any thoughts or responses around separate rates, the reasoning behind separate rates, any responses to community concerns that were raised during the open forum?
I might ask Mr. Hall just to clarify some of that. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Karen. Look, really the purpose, as the Mayor's referred to tonight, is for council to receive the submissions, and I'd suggest, as Councillor Tooley's suggested, with the second item in the recommendation, it's now for council to turn its mind to, based on the submissions received, whether it wishes to amend the budget as a result, and if so, how so. But that essentially has to be a sort of a council decision.
Did you want some further clarification around some of the questions raised? Yeah, that's what I thought that Cody asked. So just, for example, how the separate rate works.
Yep. Well, yes, through you, Mayor Karen, in terms of the mechanics of the separate rate for Gawler East, as members may be aware, that is levied each year and then immediately postponed, subject to the trigger for collection of the separate rate being when a development occurs. Now, just to clarify, one of the speakers tonight who was referencing the policy, which we'll need to amend, Mayor, is in relation to if a landholder in the Gawler East area sells their land as is and doesn't subdivide. Just to be clear, the payment collection of the separate rate would not be triggered in those circumstances.
Not a trigger, is it?
Yes, it's only when actual development occurs.
Land
Yes, correct.
Yep.
So apologies for any confusion in that regard, but that has been the underlying principle from the get-go with the separate rates.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Okay, so I think that, did you want to speak at all or happy? You've got a question, Councillor Fraser?
I have a question for Mr. Delaney. If the 530,000 is the cost of the landscaping, it's not the 30 landowners on Bowen Court that are paying for that. Isn't it all development that's the developers are paying for that as well?
We're paying for it.
Yeah, we're
already
paying for it. But when there's a separate rate on like Springwood and that as well. So when that's developed, that goes into it as well.
So I might, in fact, David Bilowitz, I might actually ask you, because this is about separate rate and actually it is used. So it's about infrastructure and where that separate rate money goes over the next few years and what it's earmarked for. I think that's what you're asking. Have I got that right?
The thing is that the people in Bowman Court aren't the only ones paying for it. They're not paying for the whole 530,000.
Okay, we could just have that clarified. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Redmond. It's a bit complex, and I'll start with the 30 ratepayers that got the letter per se. And in this whole scheme from the get-go, the whole notion of this deferred infrastructure would be in terms of infrastructure that wouldn't be delivered by the state government and would need to be repaid back by future developers. That was the only way the link road could get across the line. And there was a complex negotiation and deal that was done with the state government, ultimately, which said that they're only prepared to spend a certain amount, and there were certain things that they wouldn't deliver. The car parking along the link road alignment, and I'll reference this up to the Springwood boundary from effectively Potts Road up to the Springwood boundary, car parking, 1 footpath and street lighting along the length of the alignment. Through the process of the project, it became clear that the budget became under greater duress, and then landscaping wasn't able to be delivered per se, in the sense that they would only deliver some targeted landscaping in some areas, but not street trees. So the council turned its attention to that and thought it would be proper that that infrastructure would be incorporated into this deferred infrastructure component. In terms of deferred infrastructure, it only relates to what's been termed other future developers. That is land that is not owned by Springwood, land that is not owned by the Commission of Highways, but the remaining landowners. And that's obviously the 30 properties that received the letter. So to answer your question, Councillor Fraser, it is the 535,000, and that's the estimate of the works. They may come in lower than that in terms of once we've gone out to procurement now, and the final cost, but that's the estimate that we've used for the basis of the budget. And that will be levied against those properties that are deemed this other future developers in those other areas outside the Commission of Highways in Springwood. The Commission of Highways had in the negotiation, obviously delivering the major cost of the road, weren't prepared to fund for further infrastructure. So, however, they are paying, having said that, they are paying for the community infrastructure, the future community infrastructure that's been identified. There's, I think, broadly $8 million worth of infrastructure that would be delivered in the future. They would be paying a component of that. That wasn't road related. Springwood it was a separate component, but they are paying a substantial amount for the delivery of both the road as well as community infrastructure. They have deferred infrastructure of which they are delivering consequentially as their development occurs, some of which they have already paid DIPTI and asked them to deliver now for them. So it's quite complex, but effectively the whole basis behind this was, and in terms of when the original rate was put together with infrastructure, it would be sustainable in terms of a infrastructure charge over the land. And there was a lot of work done with respect to what that level of sustainability would be in terms of a contribution at allotment level. And it was understood that a number in the range of $10,000 to $12,000 per allotment in the final developed state would be that sustainable number. As it relates to the other future developers, where that number is sitting is quite low. It's nowhere near the $10,000 per allotment. So that's information intel that we've got from the development industry saying that's what's a fair and reasonable charge for this sort of development. And I'll just finish. If you pair this all back, this whole area wasn't able to be developed unless there was a link road. There was a 1,000 lot trigger on that Gawler East development zones. So the link road has enabled the effectively properties to increase in value in terms of their developability and the ability for this area to be effectively become a residential part of Gawler into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. I think that addresses your question. Councillor Ballalonga. I beg your pardon? Have you got a conflict? What is your conflict, Jim? You have an interest? If you could just give me a bit more information, just so we can put it in the minutes. You have an interest in a development and you're going to leave the room? Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Shanks.
Just wondering if it'd be prudent to add in a points 4 and 5 here. We've listened to the public open forum and what I'm hearing are some risks that I wouldn't mind assessed, given that we're supposed to be giving consideration to a budget. Catherine Moorhurst from the Climate Emergency Action Plan made some very valid points there, saying, look, you know, if we don't invest now, it could cost us more in the long run. I wouldn't mind seeing that all come back to us. And these separate rates, we've had a bit of back and forth, and I think it almost has confused the issue a little bit further. I'd like to see a report come back on the risk of leaving it on the 30 property owners, or what that actually looks like, because as Councillor Tooley pointed out, and some of the residents of the area, what happens if they don't sell? What happens to that money that we have to float now that we can't recoup?
Okay. So just Councillor Shanks, you're asking the mover and seconder?
Yeah, if we're able to chuck in a 0.4, that the risk be assessed in a further report to come back to council.
Does the mover and seconder agree to the change in wording? There is a report that already exists in council on the separate rate matter that could be made available. That already exists.
Does it address all the?
Anyway, the mover and seconder, do you accept that change? The mover does not accept that change. So there will be no change unless you want to put up an amendment. I'll accept that you haven't really spoken in the debate. You've sort of half spoken, but I'll accept that you haven't spoken in the debate, Nathan.
Yeah, I probably can't get my wording any different to what I was just trying to do there, to be honest. So I don't think an amendment there would be any reason for it. Is what I'm requesting trying to make making sense here, or?
Well, it is, but I'm just wondering if this report might satisfy your need for further information, or because there is a very good report. When the separate rate was first put forward, there was a consultant report put forward about the separate rate and the whole process. There was quite a bit of work done. CEO, if you can I'll just allow the CEO to explain, because that might satisfy your query.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that we can present a package of information to all members, but particularly for the interests of the new members, since new members being the last election, relative to the history of the separate rate and the more pertinent reports that have been done that explain the context and the application of the separate rate. And then there is commentary within there about risks and scenarios, I think. So we can make that information available leading up to when council deliberates on the budget.
I guess the point, if I'm able to answer that, I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is if we're going to be inundated with a whole bunch of more material that may not address some of the issues that the community have raised here tonight, are we going around in circles? I'm trying to get a hold of the community's concern to try to make an informed decision on how we're going to advance.
Well, I'll go back to our motion and I'll take it that you've spoken to the motion because our motion is about submissions. I'll allow that. I mean, that can be circulated and then perhaps that might raise some other queries. But I think we'll focus back on what we've got in front of us.
Am I able to ask a question?
You can, absolutely.
How much time do I have to put forward a motion and that highlights some of the concerns that we've received sort of today and yesterday, and given the public open forum, how much time do I have to get a motion, to get a report, to provide comment and feedback on the issues that have been raised in, one, the separate rates, and two, the climate emergency submission?
Well, we've got now Mr. Horwood will be wanting, you'll be asking council to endorse the budget towards the end of August. Is that correct?
So that's this month's meeting?
Yes. Yeah. I think that addresses your question there, Councillor Shanks. Okay, any other discussion? If not, Councillor Hughes, you wish to close the debate?
Yeah, just quickly, I won't use the 5 minutes available to me.
Yes.
That's right. Again, thank the submissions. It certainly will be part of the whole rates package that we will be assessing. And areas like some of the climate work where it is actually, a lot of it would be cost neutral and cost saving. I think it's something councillors would look at. I thank the CEO for actually, would be good to circulate the separate rates papers with the risk matrix within this. I think that'd be really good information for all councillors, because it does sort of set that whole picture of where council was in, and with the fact that the separate rate has been in now for a number of years, and it's been in place, and it's something we've worked with the developers, and is only triggered on the sale and subdivision of these properties. So it's been a process that council's been involved with for a large number of years, which was also mentioned tonight. But the whole budget is a big process that we go through every year. It is quite complex, and we do try our best to work through the budget as best we can. And it's really important that we do get these submissions. So it's really good that people have made the effort to put submissions in. And I think, as I said, we are going to definitely be going through the submissions and the extra information when we deliberate the budget. So happy for everyone to vote for this motion. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. The debate's closed. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. It is carried unanimously. Thank you. We can ask Councillor Vallelonga to come back in. Thank you. That concludes so we're moving on to now I'm on page 58 and 5.2, COVID-19 general rate relief remissions. Thank you for the report, Mr. Horde and your team. As usual, we have a officer's recommendation in front of us. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's report. I think covers off on a lot of the risk issues, and also I think it's really important to highlight that Gawler Council is one of the few councils that is actually looking at this rate relief in real dollars. I think it is good sense to actually apply a cap on that at this stage. I do think, and I've said this at other times with other similar motions in this vein, is that, that we may get a second wave or third or fourth, or it may be many years till our community actually recovers. So this is just one step in that process, but I think it's really important that we do actually have concrete sort of steps and processes in place. So I'm very happy to move this motion and sort of continue the process that we've set up.
Thank you. Councillor Samble, are you happy to second? Thank you. Do you wish to speak at all? Thank you. Councillor Shanks.
This one's just a question for Paul Horwood. And I think it's very similar to the same vein that I've been going through. With the direction that we're going, how will this affect the average ratepayer's back pocket by, we're saying we're going to increase rates. Can we quantify that to the average ratepayer in a dollar figure?
Thank you. Mr. Horwood.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Karen. As we've documented in the consultation document, in terms of the general rates component, we're proposing the 2.4% increase, which we've noted in the report, Mayor, for the average residential ratepayer relative to a general rate increase would be in the order of $39 or 75 cents per week. That's just the general rate component. And separate to that, there's obviously the waste management charge and the NRM levy. So that is the indicative impact for the average residential ratepayer.
That's based on the draft budget.
Yes, correct. And relative to ratepayers who would meet the eligibility criteria, Mayor, for an average residential ratepayer, a rates remission of up to 25%, if a 25% remission was granted, that would translate to a remission of approximately $400 for the average residential ratepayer who would be eligible and meet the criteria.
I think that addresses your question, Councillor Shanks. Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so just a question around with the 530,000, do we have any indicators at the moment as far as how many people have taken up or will be taking up the offer?
Thank you, Mr. Horwood. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Yes, again, through you, Mayor Karen. No, we don't sort of have definitive numbers, hence why we're proposing the cap. I think as we've referenced in the report and with the discussions we've had with the Gawler Business Development Group, we've got fairly good intel, so to speak, in relation to the commercial sector. And that's aided by the fact that we generally know what businesses had to close their doors in late March, for example. However, as we have referenced in the report, from the commercial sector, we're looking at about 600 properties in total, whereas from the residential sector, there's 10,000 properties. And I can't sit here definitively tonight, Mayor, and say, well, is it 1,000 residential ratepayers that might be eligible? Is it 500? So we're not exactly sure of the numbers in that regard. So that was one of the key catalysts in terms of addressing the risk side of it, to put a cap on it. But from the analysis we've done thus far, I'd be of the view that 530,000 would provide to those who are eligible for a remission would provide, if not a 25% remission, very close to it.
That addresses as far as we can at this stage. Any other discussion, Councillor Tooley?
Just a couple of questions before speaking to the motion. I understand the capping, and I hear that we're applying a rate in order to cover that worst case scenario. So if we were to pay out 530,000, then the other ratepayers have had an amount increased to the value of 530,000. So that's how it's been worked out. My question is, I don't think this will happen, but it may to some degree. If, let's take the worst case scenario. No one jumps over the hurdle, nobody qualifies. We've gathered 530, but we haven't given out anything. Do we give it back? What do we do under that scenario? And you can imagine that it could be anywhere possibility between raising 530,000 extra right down to $10 extra. We may end up with a surplus. So a little surplus, I don't think we'd worry, but if it's a significant surplus, how will we address that? What would we say to ratepayers that ring us up?
Well, our draft deficit is 1.69, so it still wouldn't be in surplus even with that. But I'll refer to Mr. Hall. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Karen. What we're proposing is that we would certainly acknowledge the applications as they are received, and with the, I think in the report, Mayor, we're suggesting a closing date for the, yes, in the recommendation 2, closing date for applications of 30th of October. So what the administration is proposing is that prior to the 30th of October, we would acknowledge the applications as they come in, but immediately after the closing date, we'd basically reconcile the applications that have been received to determine, I guess, A, whether they meet the eligibility criteria. I think it's safe to say, Mayor, there will be a lot of people out there who will meet the criteria, so I don't think there's any risk, any real risk of us not getting applications. And bear in mind, members, this has been partly in response, you might recall back in the start of April when the sort of pandemic really first hit, we did have about 8 letters from predominantly key traders in the town who had to close their doors seeking urgent rate relief, and this is sort of responding to that. But until we actually do that reconciliation of the number of applications that come in, I can't sit here now, Mayor, and say whether it's going to be whether 500,000, for example, might provide a full 25% remission. All I'd suggest, though, is once we know the final wash-up, we'll obviously then present an update report to Council, and depending on that outcome, then Council can make further considerations in that space.
Thank you. You had another question, Councillor Toole?
I guess a part A and B, and that they're related. What was the significance of the 30th of October as being a deadline? And what's the indication so far in terms of how much has come in? And are we heavily promoting this? You know, do people know what they can apply for?
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Yes, through you, Mayor Karen. The Friday the 30th of October was basically predicated on the fact that, bearing in mind we're only adopting the budget, intending to adopt the August council meeting, Mayor, the 25th of August, and invariably there's up to about a 2-week time lag in terms of once the budget's adopted to then get the rate notices out. So the rate notices, the first quarter rate notices would only be hitting the streets, so to speak, Mayor, come middle of September. And we just felt it was appropriate to provide sufficient time for people to get their applications in, bearing in mind, members, that part of the criteria with the commercial sector is to get independent letter from a registered accountant. So just mindful of the fact that that may take some time. The Gawler Business Development Group has readily put their hand up to assist in that space. So we just thought it was appropriate to provide a suitable time frame for people to get their applications in, noting that after that closing date, we'll be immediately assessing those applications as a matter of urgency.
Do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'll be speaking against the motion for the reason that I've consistently spoken against a number of these proposals, and that is I don't agree that we should be taking the approach of increasing the rates to the general community in order to cover what we're saying is a good scheme. I acknowledge that it's a scheme. I read the papers like you do, and I've read of other councils who have had no increase in their rates, and a number of different ways that councils are addressing it. We're definitely not the only one. And are we doing something? Yes, I acknowledge that. But I don't agree that with so much hardship out there, and the belief that this hardship is going to continue for some time, that we give with one hand by saying, okay, you've got to jump over a few hurdles and you've got to justify, and I don't have a problem with that as long as they're fair and reasonable, and they seem to be what we're saying to people. You've got to justify your losses, etc. But on the other hand, we're not finding that money through making significant cuts in our budget. We're just saying we'll recoup that by increasing a fee to another group. And my argument all along with this has been, and I've been pushing for a real workshop where we, the members, really have the opportunity, forget the 5-minute talking, forget the rules and regulations, but actually do our jobs as elected members and have a heart-to-heart with the budget and slice it and cut it and say, this is unprecedented times. Where can we make cuts in order to support the people in our community? And I don't believe that we have really done that. We may have tinkered around the edges, but I don't believe we've significantly done that. And I think that is what's needed. Now, we can't print money. Governments can do that, sovereign governments can do that, and they're doing it now. We're going to apply for grants, I get that. But what we can do is we can really cut in order to face the very serious issues that we're currently facing with our community. And that's been my sticking point with our approach. And I really look forward, hopefully we'll get that opportunity. The way it stands at the moment, what I'm seeing in the budget, I can't see me being one vote for that budget, because I don't think it's really realising the seriousness of the situation that we've got. I don't think we're being visionary, and I certainly don't think that we're making the cuts that we could. And there are plenty of opportunities that we could do that, and we need to do that in the long term. This recovery, again, you like me, you read the media. This recovery is not. We're not going to look at 2021 and say, guess what, we're back. It's deep-seated. The recession word's been used. There's words of depression in other places. This is long-term effects. So they're my reasons for being consistent and for registering my vote against this.
Thank you. Councillor Koch, I think you were next.
Look, I'll be supporting this. I think it's a common sense way of dealing with these issues, in particular our financial sustainability, because we need to provide a financially sustainable community. I also read the papers, and I notice that Adelaide Council is cutting their services, and also they're cutting a lot of staff. So if another elected member is saying that they want to cut staff, I think the community should be aware of that, because that's what's happening in other councils. We're not looking at that at all. We're looking at retaining all our staff as much as possible. So this is a sensible move forward. It's going to provide relief for the people that do need relief, and the rate increase notionally is really a normal rate increase, and it's for people that haven't been affected by COVID at all. So, but we've still got a huge deficit. So I think this is a very sensible and a very financially responsible way forward. So I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Shanks.
I just had a question and then speak, if that's all right. Mr. Hall, through you, Mayor, this increase, let's take COVID-19 out of the picture for a moment. What would have you projected that we would be looking at doing, COVID aside?
Mr. Forward.
Through you, Mayor Karen. Yes, if you remove COVID out of the equation, which is essentially where we were at mid-March, when we were looking to start to sort of formalise where we're looking for the 2021 budget. So in a normal year, the discussions would be in terms of the operating result, and also in terms of rate increase, which I suspect you're referring to, would be in the order of what we have traditionally allowed for in the long-term financial plan, which has been mere in the order of 3%. However, as members will be aware, last few years, invariably the position that's ultimately been landed has been between the likes of 2.4 to 3%. And that's been the appropriate prudent approach, as Councillor Koch has referred to, from a financially sustainable position, because obviously council's costs do increase like all other businesses on a year-by-year basis, and that's the indicative increase council needs to apply from its long-term financial sustainability viewpoint to ensure that we can achieve our sort of financial indicators, whether that be an operating surplus or also, Mayor, our monitoring our net financial liabilities ratio as well. So being mindful of the indicators and the targets we've got for those indicators, the rates increases applied have always invariably been towards meeting council's longer term goals and not just looking at that one budget in isolation.
Thank you. You wish to speak, Councillor Shanks?
Yep. So yeah, I'll be supporting this, and just picking up on what Councillor Tooley said. I agree that we should be having further workshops and really delving into some nitty gritties where we can, as you say, trim the fat. I guess why I'm in support of this is because we had a bit of a stringent routine where we really put our thoughts into the bowl and came to this, and I think it still is a foundation that we can build on. As you might be aware, even myself, I'm putting 30% of my councillor income towards this fund because it's something that I can afford to do at this time. So I think that a workshop would be beneficial to us all to keep on building on this, but I do think that it is a good stepping stone. I am in support of it because 75 cents a week to the average ratepayer for what it can do to the lives of people who have been affected is a big thing. And if for whatever reason we aren't taken up on the 530,000, which, there is a potential there, I think we do need to be sensible and we need to be able to turn around and go, oh, okay, well, we didn't need this 530. How are we going to put this back into the community? I mean, it's funny that it parallels with the exact amount for street trees, but yeah, that's a complete coincidence there, I think. Might be two birds with one stone there, but yeah, look, the recommendation as it sits, I'm happy with it, but I do believe we've got some more work to do in this space. So yeah.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, Councillor Hughes. Thank you. The debate's closed. I put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against, it is carried. Thank you. Right. So now we move on to, are there any questions without notice? Any motions without notice? Councillor Shanks. Sorry, Nathan, had a mental blank there.
That's right. I've sort of fumbled through these, so you might have to bear with me. I've actually got two. My motion is a report come to the August council meeting on the financial and social risks to the town of Gawler on the separate rates for the Gawler East.
So that's 2 weeks' time. Okay.
Well, I think the reports already exist, so that should be an easy one. And the second one being actually.
What's the second one?
I can read that one out.
Yep,
A report come to council on the risk of not advancing with the feasibility study or the heat pump for the swimming pool, as stated by Catherine Warhorse.
What was the wording?
A report come to, which one are we on? A report come to council on the risk of not advancing with the feasibility study or heat pump for the swimming pool.
Before I accept either motion, CEO, have you got any logistical issues with these motions? They look valid to me.
Through them, I don't have any questions in terms of the appropriateness of the question of the motions. It's just a question of time frame. The staff will put together what it can in what is basically sort of 2 or 3 working days relative to when the agenda needs to be completed. So we'll do the best we can.
Okay. It's not a lot of time, that's all.
If
okay,
I could speak to it.
So you do one at a time?
Yep. Okay. So the first one regarding the separate rates. From what I've heard tonight, we have the information there. So hopefully that wouldn't take too long, and taking on board the submissions from the community tonight and also the letters, we should be able to address their concerns pretty simply. And also I think it'd be prudent to get that information back in a simple report that not only us as councillors can make an informed decision, but also help some of the community members that are here tonight and will be affected by the separate rates to understand the process. So that's why I'm proposing to move that way.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Davies, do you wish to speak?
Look, so this one I think is, as has been said, I think there apparently are previous reports, and this is basically just asking it to be tabled so that it's available to everyone to read. So I'm happy to support that.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Tooley?
A question first. I guess it's through you, Mayor, to Councillor Shanks. Is this particularly in relation to the impact on the 30? And the reason I'm asking that question is I know the report that the CEO is referring to, but it was written before the letter went out to the 30 people. It's the general heavy report on what a separate rate means. So I'm just wondering whether your intent is to get something more specific related to the 30 submissions or 30 people.
I think Councillor Shanks has presented his motion. He can wrap up and provide that answer when you close the debate. Do you have any other questions?
Well, I'd like to make a slight amendment if the mover is happy to it, and that is to reference in that wording that specifically the 30 residents who've received the letter. Because I think what's going to be important is that when we look at that report, we just don't get a general report again. We need to talk about the financial and social risks associated specifically around this issue, because that's the budget we're facing. So I'm just wondering if the mover would add the words at the end, particularly as it applies to the 30 residents who recently received the letter.
That's the other, Mr. Delena. There's a category, isn't there? Other developers? Other future developers. I think they're classed under that, aren't they? Is that correct? Is the mover happy to incorporate that? And the seconder? Okay. As it applies to the 30 relating to other future developers. Including as it applies, that doesn't make sense, of the Gawler separate rate, including, well, I get rid of including, as it applies to the 30 residents that have received a letter relating to other future developments.
It's just highlighting that the general information needs to be supplemented with as it applies to these 30. So that's what we were including. So it's the general information included, so these are not specifically.
Yeah, no, we're losing context now. We're getting including additional information relating it. It needs to make sense. Okay, so the social risks of the Gawler separate rate, including but not exclusive to the 30 residents that have received the letter. I think that's what that means. Including but not exclusive to.
Yeah, so the way that I'm reading that is we're going to get the report, but then we're also going to assess the new line of thoughts that we've received tonight and in the letters as well. That's what I'm reading that as the intent.
So are you happy with that wording?
Yep.
Mover and seconder? You're happy with that moving? Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, so I think this one's pretty important, given that I don't know if you've noticed, but we rarely have people come and speak this passionately to us about things that affects them directly. We usually hear about it after the fact. I think the fact that we have these ratepayers that are willing to come down and sit in the chamber, they're willing to write these well-worded letters and address their elected body, is why we in turn need to respond and educate ourselves if we're to make a decision that will alter the lives of 30 people. And we need to understand what that actually looks like and what that means. So I really hope that you support this one. We shouldn't be putting too much more work on council's, the administration's plate, because as we've been told tonight, all the information's there. It's just a matter of bringing it back up and making sure that we are adequately educated. So yeah, that's me. So I hope for your support.
The debate is closed. I put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. It is carried unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Shanks?
Okay, so this one is just in regards to the work that the Climate Emergency Action Plan group, working group has been doing. This is also another easy one, which is quite good, because there are some real risks regarding not advancing with these two key items in particular. And I think it is prudent once again to make sure that we are adequately educated moving forward, because we do talk a big game on long-term financial planning. And these are two decent items that I truly believe will not only assist us in the short term, but also the long term, if some councillors are worried about the bottom dollar. That helps those beliefs. If some councillors do care about our emissions, that ticks the boxes in that way too. So once again, it's about educating us. And in fear of repeating myself on this one, but we're coming to our budget endorsement. So this is only going to strengthen our ability to make educated decisions.
Thank you. Now, you wish to second the motion, Councillor Sample. He did have his hand up first. Do you wish to speak at all? No, totally endorse what the councillor. Thank you. Then we had Councillor Kosh. Then we had Councillor Tooley, then we had Councillor Fraser, and then we had Councillor Davies, in that order.
Look, yeah, I'm happy to support this. I think when we look at the information that was provided tonight and the return on investment with the heat pump, is actually only a couple of years. It seems like a really, you're actually doing a very good thing, getting away from gas and actually reducing your costs overall. I think that's a fantastic outcome. And we actually need to look at how we go about our power procurement. And we need to look at all the options and see what's available and what's the best idea. For example, you can now get off-peak power in the middle of the day, for example. So you can actually get a mix of off-peak power in the middle of the day and the evening. So when we're actually running our operations, you might be able to actually tap into off-peak power at less than 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's actually, you need to look at all the options and what's available. And it might be a fantastic financial outcome for us, plus, getting into renewable energy as well. So I think it's important to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I think it was Councillor Tooley, then Councillor Fraser.
Whilst Councillor Shanks hasn't defined what he means by risk, I'm assuming the risk will be all-encompassing, i.e. the risk of staying the status quo, the risk of not changing, financial risks, but I hope it also includes environmental risks, because I do believe that this is where we are going to have to get in everything if we're ever going to have a chance of avoiding the climate catastrophe that confronts us, and that is that every single thing we do is going to have to ask that question. Does this drive down CO2 emissions? Does it drive up? And sometimes it won't be just the dollars that we have to look at. Sometimes a little bit of extra dollar might be needed for the greater good. And I would be hopeful that in this response that we'll get that data. And whilst this is only one item, I think in a way it's the sort of benchmarking we're going to have to do on just about everything. I think we're going to have to get to that point with every council, every government, every business. Otherwise, it's runaway. And if you, like me, are watching what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment, it's very confronting. Apart from COVID, I'm talking the climate impacts are devastating. So the urgency is there. This is a practical example of our own Climate Emergency Action Group getting down with nuts and bolts, and I think that's a really good thing. So, yep, fully support it.
Councillor Fraser.
I'll be supporting this, but I do have a question. Do we have have we got a meeting scheduled to discuss the budget when it comes back from the public?
It'll come back at the end of August. That's correct.
So when are we passing the budget?
At the end of August,
So-
at our August council meeting.
Which is only 2 weeks away.
That's correct.
So we'll be discussing it at that meeting and then passing it that day?
Yes.
That night? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think that addresses your question. Now, Councillor Davies, you're next.
Yeah, just around the wording, I'm just, because the feasibility study and the heat pump were two separate things that were discussed. I'm just not sure if they got merged in there.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I think they accidentally got merged in the wording, but the feasibility study for an on-site renewables program was a budget bid, and then separately there was discussion around the heat pump. So just to... clarify that.
Okay, so there's two separate issues, yeah, okay. Any other discussion? If not, Councillor Shanks, if you can close, please, thank you.
Yeah, I am glad that Cody picked that up. These were the two key projects that the Climate Emergency Action Plan we put forward. We've done a lot of work in this space on these two items. And because the work is already done, that's why I'm confident that we will be able to assess those risks. And picking up on what Councillor Tooley said, in my chicken scratch, I've actually crossed out financial because I didn't want to gag our ability to act as an overall. And the importance of doing this now is just picking up on what Councillor Fraser said. Yes, in August, we will be endorsing this. So that's why I think it's very important that we make sure that we know what we're endorsing in regards to if this actually turns around and proves, well, financially, we would be better off spending the money now. Then from a budget point of view, that's very smart. From an environment side, it's a no-brainer. So that's why I think it's very important to get this report back, and we should be able to simply see that this is the only way forward. And yeah, I hope to get this support, and we'll see how we go.
The debate is closed. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Carried unanimously, thank you. Any other motions without notice? I close the meeting at 8:33. Thank you. And so our next meeting is on the 25th of August. So we'll have a few minutes break and then we'll have our IES committee. Thank you, everyone.